Um, and Phil passed away a few years ago, and we have the honor of having Tony, who was sponsored by Phil, coming, and he's going to read Phil's story for us, which is on page 446 in the 4th edition, called He Lived Only to Drink. And as Tony reads the story, he's gonna interject things that he might know, or a memory or something about Phil, or maybe how Phil's story got to be in the 4th edition. And after that, Gay is going to ask questions. We have permission from Tony to record this, and it will be in the book study group. If you don't have that link, if you send me a WhatsApp message to the number on the screen, I'll glad to add that for you. And then Gay's going to ask him questions. So if you have any questions, send them to me in the chat. And when Gay's finished asking Tony her questions, then I'm going to ask the ones that are in the chat. So later, after we do all that, send the questions you have. And we do not limit this to an hour meeting. It goes however long it does. And then next week, we also have somebody coming and doing something as a presentation for history. I want to surprise you and not tell you what it is. Also want to remind you that on March 10th, the United States sets their clocks ahead, so we're going to be on a 4-hour difference. So those of you in the UK, you might want to just make a note so you don't come in and miss the meeting or get here too early. So Tony, I am going to turn this over to you. Thank you. So if you'll announce maybe your name, your sobriety date, and about Phil and the name of the story and all that, we would appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Carol. Good morning, everyone. Well, it's morning here in New York. It's great to see you guys in these Hollywood squares once again. My name is Tony, and I'm an alcoholic, and my anniversary date is January 14, 1975. And anything that I am that's of value is attributed to the grace of God, the fellowship and program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, my sponsor, Phil, his name is Phil Parker, but he's better known in AA as Phil P. But since he's deceased, most of us just use his last name. As we now know, his story is on page 446 in the 4th edition of the Big Book. And it's called He Lived Only to Drink. His anniversary date is September the 16th, 1968. And wow, thank God for him. I don't think I'd be here had not been for him and a lot of you. Okay, here we are. He had been preached to, analyzed, cursed, and counseled, but no one had ever said, I identify with what's going on with you. It happened to me, and this is what I did about it. On looking back at my life, I can't see anything that would have warned me of my family, all my family, of the devastation that alcoholism had in store for us. To our collective memory, there was no drinking on either side of the family. We were from a long Southern missionary Baptist tradition. My father was a minister, and I attended his church every Sunday with the rest of the family, and like them, was very active in religious work. My parents were also educators. My father was principal of the school I attended, and my mother taught there. They were both champions of community outreach and well respected. There was caring and togetherness among us. My maternal grandmother, herself a deeply religious woman who lived with us, helped raise me and was a living example of unconditional love. Early on, the values of morality and learning were impressed on me. I was taught that if you were well educated and morally upstanding, there was nothing that could stand in the way of your success in this life or hereafter. As a child and young man, I was evangelical, literally drunk with moral zeal, and intellectual ambition. I excelled in school and dreamed of a career in teaching and helping others. It was not until I was an adult, away from family and doing graduate work at a prestigious East Coast University that I had my first real drink of alcohol. I had tasted beer and a little wine before that, and long since decided that fruit juice tasted better. I had never been inside a bar until one evening, some fellow students persuaded me to go with them to a local cocktail lounge. I was fascinated. I still remember the hazy smoke atmosphere, the hushed voices, the tinkle of ice in the glasses. It was pure sophistication. But most of all, I remember that first sensation of warm whiskey radiating through my body. I drank so much that night that nobody believed I hadn't been drinking all the time. And I didn't get drunk. Although there were parts of the evening that I didn't remember the next day, but more important than anything else that night, I belonged. I was at home in the universe. I was uncomfortable with people. Despite my active church and school life as a child, I had never felt really comfortable. I was actually very nervous and insecure around people, and most of the time forced myself to be outgoing like my parents because I thought it was my duty. But this night in the bar was like no other time in my life. Not only was I completely at ease, but I actually loved all the strangers around me, and they loved me in return. I thought, all because of this magic portion, alcohol. What a discovery, what a revelation. The following year, I began my career as a teacher. My first job was at college 50 miles from my hometown. Before the school year ended, I had been asked to resign because of my drinking. Within that short space of time, drinking had become an accepted way of life. I love booze. I love people who drank and the places where they drank. At that time in my life, although I had lost my first job and embarrassed my family, it never occurred to me that alcohol could be a problem. From that first night at the bar, a year earlier, I had made a profound decision that was to direct my life for many years to come. Alcohol was my friend, and I would borrow it to the end of the earth. After that first job, there were many more that I lost, all because of my drinking. I taught in many schools and in different states. I was no longer the moral young man who had seen his destiny in helping people live better. I was loud and arrogant, angry, abusive, always blaming and confronting others. I was getting arrested and beaten up. I had developed a foul mouth and was frequently drunk in class and in public places. Finally, my teaching career ended in total dishonor. My family could not understand what was happening to me, nor could I. In moments of clarity, I was full of shame, guilt, and remorse. I had become an embarrassment to all who had faith in me. To others, I had become a joke. I wanted to die. Now alcohol had become the only friend I had. I wound up in an insane asylum, which probably saved my life. I do not remember how I got there. I do know that I had become suicidal. I became comfortable there, and months later, I cried when I was dismissed. I knew by that time that I could not make it in the world. I was safe behind the barred hospital windows and wanted to stay there for the rest of my life. I could not drink there, but tranquilizers and other drugs abound, and I helped myself to them. The word alcoholic was never mentioned. I do not believe the doctors knew much about alcoholism than I did. When I was released from the asylum, I moved to a large city to make a new beginning. My life had become a series of new beginnings. In time, I picked up the drink, got good jobs, and lost them as I had in the past. All the fear and remorse and terrible depression returned tenfold. It still did not register that the drinking might be the cause of all of this misery. I sold my blood. I prostituted myself. I drank more. I became homeless and slept in the bus and train terminals. I scrounged cigarette butts off the sidewalk and drank from a common wine bottle with other drunks. I drank my way to the men's municipal shelter and made it my home. I panhandled. By this time, I lived only to drink. I did not bathe or change clothes. I stank. I became thin and ill. I had begun to hear voices and accepted them as death omens. I was frightened, arrogant, enraged, and resentful of man, God, and the universe. There was nothing else to live for, but I was too frightened to die. It was at this point that a woman who was a social worker on Skid Row and a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous sat me down in her office and told me her story, how she drank, what happened, and how she got sober. No one had ever done this before. I had been preached to, analyzed, cursed, and counseled, but no one had ever said, identify with what's going on with you. It happened to me, and this is what I did about it. She got me to my first AA meeting that same evening. The people at the AA meeting gathered around me in kindness in those early days, and I did not drink. But the spiritual demons of withdrawal descended on me. I was Black, and these people were white. What did they know about suffering? What could they tell me? I was Black and bright, and the world had consistently rejected me for it. I hated this world, its people, and its punishing God. Yet I believed the people in AA were sincere, and whatever they believed in was working for them. I just did not believe that AA would work for me as a Black drunk. I genuinely believed that I was different until much later when I had what I now know to be my first spiritual awakening, that I was an alcoholic and I didn't have to drink. I also learned that alcoholism as an equal opportunity illness does not discriminate. It's not restricted to race, creed, or geography. At last, I was released from the bondage of my uniqueness. In early sobriety, I had to continue to live in a flop house filled with active drunks, not drinking. I became acutely aware of my surroundings, the foul smell, the noise, the hostility, and physical danger. My resentment mounted at the realization that I had flushed a career down the drain, disgraced and alienated my family, and been relegated to the meanest of institutions, a Skid Row shelter. But I was also able to realize that this bonfire of resentment and rage was beckoning me to pick up a drink and plunge me into my death. Then I realized that I had to separate my sobriety from everything else that was going on in my life. No matter what happened or didn't happen, I couldn't drink. In fact, none of these things that I was going through had anything to do with my sobriety. The tides of life flow endlessly, or better or worse, both good and bad. And I could not allow my sobriety to become dependent on these ups and downs of living. Sobriety must live a life of its own. More important, I came to believe that I cannot do this alone. From childhood, despite the love experience, I had never let people, even those close to me, inside my life. All my life, I had lived the deepest of lies, not sharing with anyone my true thoughts and feelings. I thought I had a direct line to God, and I built a wall of distrust around myself. In AA, I faced the pervasive we of the 12 steps and gradually realized that I can separate and protect my sobriety from outside hazards only in as much as I rely on the sober experience of others, AA members, and share their journey through the steps of recovery. The rewards of sobriety are bountiful and as progressive as the disease they counteract. Certainly among these rewards for me are release from the prison of uniqueness and the realization that participation in the AA way of life is a blessing and a privilege beyond estimate. A blessing to live a life free from the pain and degradation of drinking and filled with the joy of useful sober living and a privilege to grow in sobriety one day at a time and bring the message of hope that it was brought to me. Yes, Thank you for that. But yes, I identify with a lot that he covered and that he always said over the years. And I think that's why I had asked him to be my sponsor, because I too, as some of you heard, I drank myself to the Bowery. The Bowery was Skid Row in those days. And I don't know how I survived that area down there, like over a year. I was down there in 1974, late 73, 74, and I got sober in 75, but for the grace of God, someone referred me to the Greenwich Village group where Phil had went to his first meeting, and his sponsor, Helen, who has since passed, was there as well, and her sponsor, a man by the name of Barry Leach. I don't know if you guys remember him, but he wrote Living Sober. And I never forget, Barry gave us all a copy of Living Sober. I still have the copy 49 years later, one day at a time. So Phil was very instrumental in my life because again, we had I don't know how many great experiences. Along with him, I think we attended like 5 international conventions, and I don't know how many those places retreats. We used to call them spiritual retreats. So we used to attend, and he was one of the instructors at the retreat. They recruited him as a volunteer instructor, and he taught us the importance of attending AA meetings. He said that 75% of the recovery process is the attendance of the AA meeting. And the other 25 is what happens once we get there. He said we get to know others, others get to know us, and most of all, we get to know ourselves. Man, I'm in the process of getting to know me. I did not know who I was or what I'm about. I now know I'm an alcoholic and cannot or will not pick up the first drink or drug, just for today. And if you heard him mention in this story about he had to keep his sobriety separate. He also taught us that sobriety is in his right hand. He said, has to remain unmovable, it has to remain steadfast, and it has to remain non-negotiable in his right hand. He said in his left hand is what? Is the epidemic. Yes, he was talking about 9/11, and his left hand, he says, has to be changed. We get married, he said, we get divorced. We gain money on the stock market here in the city, we lose it. And our children sometimes speak to us, other times they don't. And also siblings over here, this is life. Life is changeable. He said, but it has nothing to do with the sobriety. Sobriety had to remain steadfast, live a life by itself. And I have 2 grandsons, adults, and in as much as I love them, they don't come before my sobriety. And by the way, they know that. They don't interfere with me attending my meetings or any AA affiliations. And I think some of you heard me mention when I spoke here that I was with my sober wife for 45 years here in Alcoholics Anonymous. And January 1st, 2020, she passed away. She made her transition, and there was no reason or excuse for me to pick up the first drink, because I have learned here in these rooms that sobriety has to be separate. And for me to pick up a drink doesn't bring her back. It just doesn't. It would be 2 funerals, because I would eventually succumb to my death, because I was like my sponsor. I was arrogant, I was belligerent. I was absolutely crazy. I don't know why they didn't put me into what he called a nut house. I guess because at that time, they sent guys like me to Skid Row, to the Bowery. And down on the Bowery and Skid Row, you was expected to just will away. You was not expected to come back to this kind of life that I've had for the past 49 years, one day at a time. So this way of life, I'm here to tell you guys, if you have any reservations, especially you younger folks, or any kind of uncertainties, we just make it very simple. We just say, just keep coming back. Just keep coming back and listen to learn, learn to listen, and ask questions to those of us who were here when you arrived. Because that's what they did for me. All you hearing me say right now is what's been passed on. Nothing original for me. I don't have anything original except my experiences, and then some people had my experiences before I did, like my sponsor did. So that should be enough for me, but I'm open to questions if I could answer them. Oh, by the way, let me just mention another thing he said before I forget. He said every day he takes the first 3 steps with him. He recite them. He said he remind himself that he's powerless over alcohol, people, places, things, situations, and circumstances. And he said that his life is unmanageable. This is what he said, okay? He also said that he had to come to believe that this was a power in these rooms, as you heard him state in his story, that was greater than self, that could, didn't say would, that could restore him to sanity, which implies that what? He's crazy and I'm crazy too, not Bowery crazy, not Skid Row crazy, but crazy in terms of some of the decisions I make and some of the times the way I think. I could easily be crazy, so I have to keep coming. This is an incurable disease, he said. So no matter how long I'm here, I'm still an alcoholic. I'm not cured. And I like that because he kept it that simple. Also, he said that he decided in the 3rd step that he had to turn his will and his lives, plural, over to the care of the God of his understanding, which worked primarily through the people in Alcoholics Anonymous. So I asked him what was his will. He says will was the way he think, the way he behaved, the way he conducted himself. Very willful person, he said, because he was supposed to have been, bright, and all of that. But the disease of alcoholism don't care enough about how bright we are, how much money we have or don't have, it doesn't care about that. It's, as he says, the equal opportunity disease. And he said the lives plural was very simple. He said he had to turn his present life over, his past life over, he don't dwell on it. And if he have a future life, he turned that over as well to the care of the God of his understanding. And if he's cared for, he said, he's also protected. I have not been to an AA meeting over all these years and not felt protected. The people have always from day one said to me, welcome, reached out, engaged me here in New York City. And I'll be honest with you, when I was my first meeting, when someone said, welcome, I almost jumped out of my skin. Welcome, are you kidding? Here I am, I'm disheveled, my hair's matted, I hadn't bathed and I don't know when, and you're saying welcome. So anyway, I'm thinking, what do you want from me? I didn't have anything, ladies and gentlemen, anything. So anyway, I'm grateful, Carol, that you asked me to come and do this. And now I'm open to questions or whatever anybody else have to discuss. I'll do. I'm fine.
Thank you so much. I'm going to give it to Gay in a few minutes and she'll ask you some questions and I have some in the chat. We appreciate you doing it. Was Phil's sobriety date September 16th, 1968?
That's correct.
I just had that for those who came in late. His story is on page 446 in our Alcoholics Anonymous book. It was Phil Parker. He lived only to drink. And Tony, who got sober 49 years ago, he celebrated 3 Sundays ago, is reading his story and giving us some updates on who his sponsor Phil was. So Gay, I'm going to give it to you to ask questions, and when you're finished, I'll ask the ones that are in the chat. If you have any questions you want to ask Tony, send them to me in the chat, and I will ask them after Gay does her questions.
Hi, Tony. Hi,
Hi.
everyone. My name's Gay, and I'm an alcoholic. Thank you so much for coming and sharing that. The first question I have is, did you know Phil before his story was in the big book?
Oh, yes.
And how did his story being in the big book change him in any way?
Well, I put it this way, if it changed him, I tell you what, he became more humble. He's always been a humble man. He wouldn't have been, see, if my story would have been in the big book, especially at that time, I would have been upstairs outside of the meeting handing out leaflets. But see, he's not like that. He had the kind of humility that I'm still striving for. And by the way, he didn't tell us until about 2 or 3 years that his story was in the big book, because that's the kind of guy he is. And by the way, please be reminded, I think you all have access to this pamphlet that called, Do You Think You're Different? The story is there as well on page 27. Do you think you're different? So when you go to your group, check that out. And you may want to hold on to a copy of that. So thanks for those questions. And what else?
Okay. And I heard you share one other time about you would drive with him to meetings where he was speaking. And then you said on the way back, y'all would debrief. Can you tell me about that debriefing process?
Yes, I can. Well, first of all, I was the second honorary chauffeur. I got my first automobile when I was here in New York City, when I was 5 years sober. So I've been driving for what, 44 years, and I drove him everywhere. You name it, I drove him, because he was the kind of man that it's just incredible. I mean, to everyone. I never saw him didn't have time for you, me, Bob, Drew, or anyone. So I drove him everywhere, yes. And we had a meeting before the meeting, going to Long Island. Let's use that as an example. We had a meeting during the meeting when he would speak, and then we come back, we would debrief. So my point is, there was no flaws. I'm not saying he's perfect. He'd be the first to say that, oh no, I got a lot to learn, a lot to do. But the debriefing period was like, he would talk about where he was born in Philadelphia, and then he was raised in Manning, South Carolina. So I didn't know that he was born in Philadelphia. He never talks about that in his story, like when he speaks. We all assumed that he was born in Manning because we had driven him down there, of course, you know, to meetings. But the debriefing process is very simple. We don't pick up the first drink. We don't pick up the first drug. We go to meetings and we try to help someone. If anybody asks you to do service in Alcoholics Anonymous, you try not to say no. Very simple. He doesn't say, well, I think I should have said this or I should have said that. He doesn't do that. We didn't, he has spoken so much, so he said so much, so I can't hardly remember. And keep in mind, I'm 81 now. When I met him, I was 32. So, you know, I've been around the block a few times, but my memory is not as sharp as what it was. But I'm still hanging in there and going to meetings and doing the things I need to do. So yeah, the debriefing process was always a lot of fun, a lot of laughter, a lot of humor. You know, we all know we're not a glum lot. Yes, right.
And did he have a favorite line in the big book that he quoted more than any other line in the big book?
Well, not so much in the big book, but in his, you know, the qualification, his favorite line was always, don't pick up the first drink. You go to meetings and try to help someone. Kept it very simple, as I said, the most simplest person. Listen, they sent me to college when I got sober, and I had some decent professors, but I never had nobody to teach me like this guy. And I'm gonna tell you why. Because he had a way of telling you to go to hell and you look forward to going. Yeah, that's just how humble he was. And you will remember and things that he would say because he kept it simple. Don't pick up the first drink, Tony, first drug. Go to meetings and try to help someone do service. I like that.
Do you have any stories about people who found out that his story was in the big book and then they acted weird or different or responded in an unusual way?
Yes, well, we have, well, he's since deceased, a friend of mine, Richard, I could use his full name, Richard Dietz, did not know that Phil's story was in the big book. And Phil was speaking at a meeting one morning, and one of the guys in the meeting raised his hand to comment. And he said to the group, well, Phil, you didn't say anything about your story being in the big book. And so the guy, Richard Deeks, raised his hand. The attorney I was telling you about, he said, I don't know about Phil, but if Tony G or my story was in the big book, we'd be the one that handing out leaflets. So he's the one I got that idea from. But Phil, no, there were people who always encouraged, once they heard it, they would encourage him to, to talk about that, but he never did. He just kept it simple. He just told us select a few, those of us who he worked with. And we are the ones who told other people, especially me.
What would you say is, you've told us already some of the story, the ways he helped you, but is there one lesson that you learned from him that sticks out in your mind as being more powerful than the others?
Yeah, so well, that's interesting. But again, he always kept it simple. He would always encourage us or anyone, just if you come in with a so-called issue or problem or whatever we may describe it as, if it relates, he said he always related it to our alcoholism and addiction. And he said that what we need to do is get sober, build a foundation in sobriety, trust this process, eventually try to get yourself a good sponsor and put these steps into your life and the traditions, let's not forget those, to the best of your ability. And he carried us along gradually because he said the healing process is gradual, because people like me, I want an instant gratification, but it doesn't work that way. So yes, his favorite thing I would say, line I would say, but just keep it simple. Don't pick up the first plate, don't pick up the first draw, go to your meetings, and if you can, get your hand up. And most times, he said, we need to listen to learn and don't pass up an opportunity to keep your mouth shut. So that's what his one of his lines were. That helped me because as I said, I was with my wife 45 years in AA because he taught me the value of keeping my mouth shut. Yes, he did. Hell of a man.
So why do you think why were you drawn to him, and why do you think others were drawn to him?
Well, that's another good question. I think because he just seemed to be caring and loving towards everyone and people. He has the kind of persona and personality that could easily draw you to him because he, as I said, he was a teacher. So he loved to teach. He loved to pass on what he had learned to others and have patience, something I didn't have, with us. I think I may have mentioned that I went with him one time or took him out to Long Island. Now this is like 8 o'clock at night when the meetings were started at 8 o'clock. I think some of you all remember that. Not 7 and 6 like they are now. And he spoke and then the meeting was over, I think about 10, 9:30 or 10. So here I am, I'm ready to go because I got to go to work the next day. And he's talking to this one, he's talking to that one. He give this one 5 minutes, that one 10 minutes. I said, well, oh, come on, I'm trying to pull him to school, pull him by his coat. Come on, I got to go to work. And he ignored me and he gave these people the time. I think I may have gotten to work at 11 o'clock. I'm due to work at 12, work 4 to 12 at that time. So my point is, this man was just unique in terms of how he would make himself available to everyone. And oh my God, it hurt my heart when we discovered that he had prostate cancer. Anyway.
So thank you for all your answers. You said he could also be very blunt and tell you the truth about what was going on. Can you tell us one time when he hurt your feelings?
Yes, of course. Okay, I had been working, hurt my feelings more than once, but I had been working and we worked with Alcoholics and Addicts, believe it or not. I worked for the city of New York, who dealt with homeless alcoholics, and I had been homeless, he had been homeless, and a few of us, so we could identify with them more so than others who had not been homeless. So I was at work one day and I spoke to one of the guys who was in charge. I told him that we needed to do something, different in helping these people, because what we're providing them with a bed and a meal and all that, but that's not helping. These people carrying weapons and they're cursing and ranting and raving like I did when I was in the bar. So I'm not pointing the finger. My point is, so I go to this guy who was in charge and he said, listen, you're getting paid to enforce somebody else's rules and regulations. So in essence, he said, you do the job. It's like you keep your mouth shut. I didn't particularly like that. So I go to Phil, run into Phil with this justifiable resentment. And he too gave me some constructive criticism that I'll never forget. He said, Tony, in essence, this is what he said. I can't quote him verbatim, but in essence, he said, listen, McNeil told you right. McNeil he's the director, but he has a job to do just like we all have to do. You have to go there, put your 7 hours in. Maybe you can start an AA meeting, which will help these people to turn their life around. And surely enough, that's what I did. I go back to the shelter system and on my own took it upon myself to start this AA meeting. Would you believe we had some success? Then I got called downtown because they want to know who gave me permission to do that. And I couldn't say, Phil didn't give me the permission to do it, but he gave me an idea. And so I got reprimanded by him. So he told me that you need to practice what I told you. Don't pass him an opportunity to keep your mouth shut. And I thought he was going to agree with me, but he didn't. So that was just one. So, but he give you constructive criticism, man. Oh no, that's what enabled me as I look back to grow to this point.
Well, I love the way you have shared about him because you've helped us to know him better. But I also appreciate the inspiration that you have brought to this meeting by your openness, your honesty, and your sharing. And I am so sorry about the grieving that you've had to go through losing your wife. And I'm just so grateful to get to hear you again today. And I will pass it back to Carol and she can read some other questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gay. Wow.
Thank you. And thank you, Tony, also. And there's a really nice obituary article that they wrote about Phil in the New York Times. You can just do a search, Phil Parker, who helped homeless alcoholics. He did pass away. It was June 15th, 2016. And Tony, I'm sorry for your loss of your sponsor. I've had 3 die with long-term sobriety, and it's not easy to go through that. And I do have some questions in the chat for you. But one of the questions, if you said it, I missed it, but how did Phil come about having his story in the 4th edition? Did somebody ask him to write it? Did he see an article about the 4th edition stories being submitted, or how did that process go? Do you know any of that?
Would you believe he was so humble that he never ever mentioned how it came about? And I didn't ask him. I was maybe too afraid, but I don't know. But I do not know how it came about. But I do believe that his sponsor, Helen Ware, who has since passed on, and Barry may have had something to do with it.
Okay. The questions I have in the chat, one of them is, was Phil able to continue his teaching career after he realized his spiritual awakening?
Well, no, just us in the rooms. He informally, he taught us a lot of lessons, but he never went back to teaching for to support himself. He became the director of alcoholism and substance abuse services for New York City. And, he was able to teach in that manner, taught myself and another brother named L.J. Reese and a few others, how to work with and share with the sick, suffering alcoholic and addict without, really mentioning, if we didn't have to, that we were in AA, because we didn't want to break our anonymity unless it was to help us and others, because sometimes the press run away with stuff and we didn't want to get into any trouble.
I bet it was a lot different back then too than it is now.
Absolutely.
What were meetings like back then that you all went to?
Meetings? Oh, they were loving, and man, I'm here to tell you, I give you an example. I went to my first meeting, and of course, he and Rudy and others were there. And as I said, they had 3 greeters at the door. We thought they were security, so we just knew they weren't going to let us in. But they said welcome, and right away they started to engage us, and they brought us into the meeting and sat us in those hard metal chairs during those days, and told us, one guy said, "You take the cotton out your ears and put it in your mouth." Oh my God. Phil didn't say that, but some of the other guys. And that was something that helped me as well. But in terms of the people at that time, they were really, really loving and caring and engaging. And some lady said that she wasn't going to allow us to fall between the cracks. Now, I didn't know what that meant then, I do now. So they were, they were on us and taught us the value again and the importance of coming to meetings. So I didn't have a problem with that, because see, I was on Skid Row, I was on the Bowery, as I said, so I didn't have any place else to go. And I realized that the people there were so nice and caring and loving. I said, oh my God. Oh, by the way, they had a lot of donuts, cookies and cakes and all of that, coffee and tea, free stuff. And again, I was on the Bowery, so I didn't have anything. But I realized the people over there at the AA meeting were so friendly and caring. So at least we can go over there and eat. And in the process, I was listening without even realizing. I started to identify. So that's what saved my life. Yes, they were much loving. They're loving nowadays, but in those days, they paid more attention to us. I guess because we didn't have that many members like we have now.
Okay, another question I have, they're interested in the process of sponsoring, such as how did Phil start working with you? Did you have to write on steps 1 through 3? Did Phil have a morning and evening routine? And if so, what was it? And also, I'd like to know how soon he got you into service and working through the steps and the process he took you through.
Well, that is another good question. Well, what he did, since he had teaching background and experience, he was pretty smart in terms of guiding us into the process. We started off setting up the chairs and the ashtrays. By the way, here in New York City, we had to sweep and mop floors and clean the bathroom. And I had said I wasn't going to do that. That's not for me. And he and others said, oh, yes, you are going to do it. And I said, I'm not going to do it. The other guys said, they're not going to do it. So he said, oh, yeah, you're going to do it. And I said, why? He said, because we did it. If you know, he had the we concept in the book. He said, we did it. And that changed my whole attitude, changed my whole mindset. So again, yeah, eventually, see, he was smart enough to give us enough time just to see if we were going to stick around to attend meetings. And eventually he started to introduce us to the first 3 steps, as I said. Not that the others aren't important, we know that, but he said that the first 3 is the foundation. So I think I was about maybe a year and change before he introduced me to them. And by the way, a group of us used to go over to his home. Oh yeah, we'd go over to his home, and he would really have enough time to teach us. And I want to take a minute to show you guys this book. Are you guys aware of this book? It's a great book. In case you're not aware of it, you gotta get it, please. And I hope you see it, Bob. Great book. Oh, so anyway, that's how he was. He was you know, again, had the background of teaching, and he knew when and how, and he would use layman terms to get us to grasp what he was trying to teach and the importance of getting sober, staying sober, and becoming a part of this way of life. And I'm so grateful for that, because that's all I do now is pass on what he taught me. And others who still around, they pass on to what he taught us.
Thank you. Did Phil, when he came in, did he have a good relationship or concept of a higher power, or was it a struggle for him? Do you know? And also, if you had one, how did he help you through that process?
Well, he said, now, as you know, he was raised in the Baptist church, but he had long given up on his God or his grandmother's or his father's God. So he was not very happy about that, because he felt after he had, you know, ended up on Skid Row, he didn't get his master's degree from school, but after he had ended up on Skid Row, he felt that God had turned against him, whatever God of his understanding had turned against him. And so he had to get a God of his understanding and AA, and his God of his understanding primarily was the people, because he felt that God speaks through people, primarily through those in AA. And that is not to say, as he said, he didn't get support other way. That has been my experience. I didn't have a problem with the God, because growing up in Florida, my grandmother was, wow, she was a Baptist guru, so to speak, and we went to church every Sunday. Every Sunday. If you didn't want to go, you went anyway if you lived in her home, and school every day. And you had to do well in school or do your best. And I think my grandmother only went to like the 5th or 6th grade, but she was smarter than all of us put together. and most of the kids have college degrees, but she was smarter than all of them. So no, I didn't have a problem with the God concept. I just learned from him and was staying open. I was, I guess, not smart enough, but I guess I trusted him to the point where I tried to stay open to learn what he had to teach and what he had to say, because it seemed to be working for him and others who came before me that he was trying to help, and everybody else who loved him.
Yeah, sounds like him being a teacher probably helped also in that.
Oh yeah.
I have another couple questions in the chat. One was race an issue in 1975 or 1968, and were the meetings mixed?
Well, when they first referred me to the British Group here in New York City, that's on the west side, it was only about, let's see, maybe 5 Black people. I didn't see any Hispanics, and the rest was white people. But man, everybody was so supportive, which surprised me, because keep in mind now, I'm from Florida, Jacksonville, Florida, where I grew up, and that was not the case down there, not then. It's a little bit better now. But the people here, I know they recognized that I was Black and they was white, but that never became an issue. So I love that. So that enabled me to relax, you know, and really trust this process. And I think that's why I'm still here. And by the way, wherever I go, and I've been lots of places and meetings, you know, I go, and when I go to a meeting, my mission is to not pick up the first drink and not drug, and be friendly to anyone who may be a little shaky or nervous. And if I detect that they don't trust me, that's fine. Because you got to keep in mind, Carol, which is a great question, we all are different, but we have a whole lot of similarities. Let's not forget that. And some people don't trust people, whether we're in AA or not. Let's face it, so much goes on in this world. So I tell people nowadays in my group, keep in mind, these are real people. Make sure you put your purse where you can see it, put your jacket where you can, keep an eye on it. We are real people in AA, come on. I'm not a saint, I'm a work in progress myself. So anyway, yeah, I had a problem with race. I knew I was Black and this was white. And I got, oh my God, nowadays you can imagine the friends I got. I'm talking about all kinds of people. I mean, all kinds of people. They love me. They're in this apartment all the time. And I love them. Can you imagine? Where else you going to get that at? You tell me.
Yeah.
I mean, genuine love, genuine. So anyway, thank you for that question.
Thank you so much. I agree with you. That's why one of the reasons I have you and others coming to read the stories, to show that we are real people, that, you know, the
Yes.
stories aren't made up, that they're actual people that we get to know. And I think it's going to be interesting when the 5th edition comes out, that some of the stories we may have been people we're meeting through these online meetings. I have another question. It says, if possible, can you please say again how your step work started? Like, how soon did Bill get you into working through the steps, and how long were you sober when he had you start like the 4-step or any of the steps? Can you, they want a little more detail on how you got it, he got you into his step work, or if you know how he did it, like how long he was sober when his sponsor Helen got him into it.
Well, Helen was very strict. So, and he's pretty smart. So she probably started him, I think he said around his 2nd year, something like that, because Phil had been very physically sick, you know, very frail, and you know, that affected his emotional and spiritual and his mental being. But with us, he said after about a year change, he told us he wants us to concentrate on the first 3 steps. And then I remember going over his house, I guess I was probably less than 2 years. And then he would start talking about the first 3 steps in more detail. And he said, well, you let me know when you're ready to do a 4th and 5th step. And I'm thinking, I am not ready, you know, for that. But he had a way, as I said, telling you to go to hell and you look forward to going. So he would get you, you know, involved. And yes, that's how I got involved. I can't remember whether I was 3 years or 4 years or what, but I know he got me involved and taking a look at myself and not blaming others for what I had caused on myself, you know, and my then wife and all of that, who had asked me to leave after about 10 or 12 years being married, because I had a little slight resentment. But it wasn't her fault, it was my fault. I know that now. But, you know, I was a little angry and confused and crazy. So, yeah, see, it was about maybe my 3rd year. I don't know. I don't remember. But I do know, yeah, he was extremely instrumental. And also, by the way, we also, you know, he got us involved in traditions as well later on. How important they are, you know, to the steps, as the steps are to us as individuals. You know, he taught us that. So that's important as well.
Yeah, and you shared something, you know, my sponsor, when you said you went to visit him, so did others. I met my first sponsor because somebody at a meeting when I was new said there's somebody who needs a meeting to her house. She was frail, couldn't get out. And I got her number and called her, and that's how we connected. So a lot of my meetings in early sobriety were sitting on her bed, and we would read the big book and the literature and get into it. And she had me get into it right away. So it is important once people have health issues to keep them in touch with the rest of us. So
That is so true.
you know, we forget about that. But,
Well,
and
I tell you, I want to say this before I forget. Carol and Gay, you are 2 remarkable ladies. The men, we understand them as a man, but you are 2 remarkable ladies. I'm here to tell you. I'm so glad I met you both and hear your comments. Wow.
thank you, Tony. I feel honored to be in the position to get this accomplished. So I appreciate everybody's support. I know that you celebrated 49 years 3 Sundays ago. And
Yeah.
is there something with your years of sobriety that you do that helps you to stay sober, but live peaceful no matter what is happening in your life? Maybe, you know, I still share things and use the prayers and suggestions my first sponsor gave me. And I still do almost everything I do now that I did when I was new. And so are there some things that maybe Phil instilled in you or shared with you that you share a lot with others or that help you a lot in challenging times?
Yes, yes, because the guy called me, one of the guys I'm working with, just before I came on the Zoom. And one of the things I just remind myself that he reminded us is that, we have no control over people, places, situations, and circumstances. We are powerless, right? And he said that the concentration should be on me, on my sobriety. I don't pick up the first drink or drug, because I smoke reefer. I didn't use any other drug, but me personally, I smoke reefer. We call it back in my day. So I don't pick up any alcohol or reefer. And I go to the meeting every day. Let me just tell you what my schedule is. Monday through Friday, I go to what we call the Grateful Group. Here in New York City, we meet from 5 to 6. We have a Monday beginners meeting, Tuesday open discussion meeting, Wednesday step meeting, Thursday meditation meeting, Friday big book meeting. Now that's every week. Daily I attend that. Saturday, I'm on the Zoom from 2 to 3, 1 hour meetings that we used to go to in person that we lost, but we still have it on the Zoom. And then Sunday, I would be over to my 10 o'clock meeting, but you asked me to be here. And once I leave here, I'm going over there anyway. My point is, that's my routine. And that enables me to stay sober and reasonably contented. Not contented 100%, reasonably contented. You know what I mean? And I tried to stay in my lane. In other words, mind my business, right? Because I was going to fix this one and fix that one and fix the other. No, I can't do that. I'm powerless. But I stay in my lane again and mind my business and try to be of service. Respect myself too, by the way, and my fellow man. Respect myself and my fellow man. And I try not to offer any suggestions or any opinions, but if you ask me, I'm certainly going to tell you what I think and what I've learned. So that's basically what I do. Oh, and I've always say some kind of prayer. Like this morning, I said, I'll tell you what I said, very simple. I said, I thank God for waking me up sober, and giving me the gift of life and the gift of sobriety. That's what I say almost every morning. And I keep the 24-hour book. I think some of you know about or heard about the 24-hour book. Keep it in the bathroom so I could be reminded to read it every day. 24-hour book. Little things like that enabled me to stay reasonably contented. And again, I'm 81 and a half now. So, I'm not a child. So I have to remind myself that I want to stay relatively healthy and sane and stay in this process and be of service. Simple as that. So thanks for asking that question too, Carol.
Thanks, but you answered one of the questions I was going to ask you. And, one of my first sponsor, her name was Lois, she had prayers for me all the time. One of them was, God, if it be your will, can I please not do things to hurt myself anymore? And that worked in lots of ways. Maybe eat right or sleep or keep my mouth shut or speak up for me. Lots of different ways, or ask God to let me see people in situations as God does and to do things for God, and then I don't get resentful. And so there's a lot of those that I would use. And I heard somebody not long ago that he shared, and I heard him many times, but I guess my ears were open or he didn't share, but he said one of his prayers is, God, if it be your will and you see fit, I would appreciate being a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous another day. And I like that because that reminds me of what I need to do to be a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I like living in contented sobriety. So I'm glad you shared that. Are there any questions that or anything you would like to share that Gay or I did not ask you? Some final things you would like to share with us?
Well, I don't know if anybody know, but I think I mentioned to you, and it wasn't in the book, that we have attended about 6 while he was alive, international conventions. And in 1995, he was what they referred to as the keynote speaker at the International Convention in San Diego, California. And at this particular convention, the coordinators had said no cursing. Please, no cursing from any of the speakers. So he said, y'all have to excuse me, but I have to remind you that I was a shitty, pissy drunk on the Bowery. That's what he said. I said, oh my God, I cringed. I didn't know he was gonna say that. So yes, that's the kind of direct person he was, and he was trying to convey that this is not a cute disease. It attacks and destroys good people. If you think it doesn't, look at you guys here. Good people. It really does. And it doesn't, again, discriminate. And not only does it attack us, it attacks our loved ones, our family, you know, our friends. So he mentioned that, and I've never forgotten that. Wow. Oh, there's so many stories. Oh, we also, a group of us took him on his 16th anniversary up to Boston, where he had went to school at, up at Harvard. And he gave us a lecture on well, you know, that big statue they have there called John Harvard, and the whole nine. Like I say, he loved to teach. He wasn't being boisterous or bragging. He was just giving us a lesson about, you know, what could happen if you stay, you know, in this way of life. And we have a lot of people here who he has helped, you know, have went on back to school and made a, you know, life for themselves. We don't talk about that much, but we just will focus on staying sober and giving back, you know, because we all know that there are cash and prizes that comes with sobriety in terms of people going back to school and getting educated and also degrees that will, you know, open up doors that is otherwise closed to them. So anyway, those things are, I think, are important.
Thank you. Got two more questions for you. One is, did Phil laugh a lot? Did you have things where you told him and he would just laugh or make you see it differently? And how would he go about that? And
My God, I can't believe you asked that question. Did he laugh a lot? That's all he did. You told us so many stories. I'll tell you what he did. I'll tell you one that comes to mind when you asked that. He said he had gotten drunk in his hometown, Manning, South Carolina. And he had been to this house, you know, they call it like a juke joint, they call it, that's the slang name. And he said he had gotten drunk and said he was trying to make it back to his father's house. And he fell in this grave that was half full of water. And he said how he didn't drown. He said, it was but for the grace of God. I said, Phil, you fell in the grave. He said, yeah, fell in the grave. That sobered him up. The water in the grave sobered him up. And he was able to make it home. And we laughed and we cried about those kind of things. He was such a fun-loving person. You don't know how his laughter would affect all of us. Because he looked back at his life and he said, in essence, you know, I had no business being on Skid Row, the Bowery anyway. But this is an equal opportunity disease. It attacks and destroys people like me. So you know what it'll do for you, Tony, or anyone else, because you know there was no drinking in his home like it was in mine initially. So again, yes, he was full of laughter, full of fun. He would always read the group history at the Greenwich Village group when we have our group anniversary, and he would always have some jokes or some laughter. And so yes, we're not a glummer.
thank you. Brought up another question when you just shared that. Did he share the history of Alcoholics Anonymous? Was he interested in the history, and did he instill the steps, traditions, and concepts, the importance of them to you and the others he sponsored and shared with?
Yes, he would, you know, he kept it very simple. He didn't go off on he wasn't a big book, as we call it, thumper, so to speak, but he knew a lot. And I think that the reason why he didn't really share too much in that area because he didn't want to put himself on some kind of pedestal and leave us like we were. So he would like get us as individuals and just talk to us about what he knew about the structure and how Helen and Barry helped him and others, you know, like Father Don, oh, forget him, forgot about Father Don, who was a priest. He helped us as well. So, you know, he was, you know, kept it very simple. He didn't go too far to the right or left.
Did he have interactions with Bill Wilson or know him? Do you know?
Okay, Bill passed, I think in 1971, I think, and Phil did meet him, Phil and Helen met Bill. I didn't, of course, I didn't come into 75.
Okay.
And there was, you know, we met Lois, you know, we would go up on the dais and say hello to Lois because they will have here every year, we call it the Bill W. Dinner Dance every year here, and we still have it at the New York Hilton. And by the way, I might add, and I hope I don't sound like I was boasting, but I was one of the speakers and what is that, 2018, yes. So that was one of the highlights of my sober career. Someone thought enough of me to ask me to speak. And also my friend who Phil sponsored, L.J. Reese, he was also one of the speakers. He always used his full name so I could say that. He was one of the speakers as well. So anyway, I'm sorry?
I was gonna say, other than Helen and Barry, do you know the lineage farther back than that?
Yes, Father Don, Mary Phelps, let's see. That's about far back as I can remember. All the rest came, you know, after, I guess, me.
Oh,
Yeah, but Father Don, I forgot, he was a priest. We don't want to forget him. And a woman named Mary Phelps. I think Mary was a nurse who we love. Oh, she was instrumental in helping me, my God. She the one told me that, when the last time you had a physical? I didn't even know what she was talking about. I love it. Yeah, physical exam. I didn't know what that meant. I said, are you kidding me? I never had a physical. If I can remember. Anyway, oh man, these 8 people, I'm here to tell you, have saved my life, Carolyn. You have no idea. Oh my God.
all right, one last question in the chat. Was Phil's family appreciative of his service? How did they feel about the time he spent and how he changed?
Oh my God. His mother, Miss Belva Parker, would come up here to New York City and attend meetings with us. She was so overwhelmed about Alcoholics Anonymous and what it had done for her son. And of course, you know, she heard him speak numerous times, but she knew a little bit of the story before she heard him speak because of his behavior. Yes, to answer your question, yes. And also his brother, Francis too was instrumental. He was a younger brother. And I think he too and his kids had benefited from Phil's story and his experiences and helping us and loving us. I think I mentioned to you that we I'm not sure, gave him a memorial celebration. And tell you what I'll do, I have, you know, what they call a CD. If you give me your address and all of that, I'll send you a copy, let you hear it for yourself, and maybe you can pass it on to some of your friends.
That would be great. We'll do that later. Thank you so much. I don't have any more questions. There's none in the chat. We appreciate you so much. We're going to let everybody unmute and thank you. And